the trend is usually early on is when the worst shows happen. But, some people, no matter how long they've been doing it, they still get that one. What do you think your most recent hell gig is?
My most recent hell gig was Naples, Florida, and it was honestly not that long ago. And that's when they really hurt. Like, they don't hurt that much in the beginning. You're almost expecting that. They really hurt when you're 20 years in and you've been headlining for 15 years on the road. And that's when the hell gigs are really are painful. And I just had one in Naples, a place called, I don't know if you ever played it, it's called Off the Hook Comedy Club down there in Naples, Florida. Captain Brian is the owner's name, and you have to call him Captain Brian. You can't call him because he's a captain and he earned that title. And it's just, you could ask most comedians who played it, and they get top headliners. They get all the guys, and it's no disrespect to Brian who owns it and anyone else, but the people in Naples, Florida, it's like a very yellow Lamborghini crowd. I don't know if that explains who you're dealing with down there. Yeah. And they want to be a part of the show, and they will not stop until they are a part of the show.
How many shows?
And you do a full weekend. You do one Thursday, 2 Friday, 2 Saturday. I think even a Sunday. And it was it is a restaurant, full blown functioning seafood restaurant, and a comedy club in the midst of it. It's I think who is it? Sam Morrell. Yeah. I think Sam Morrell has an amazing story about it. And I think Sam was there like the week before me when he had his hell night. And then I went, and I had just, of course, it's the same thing you probably hear from everybody you have on here. It's just, I mean, I had a woman come on stage, take the microphone from me, and I just was just like, take it, go ahead. And she, 15 minutes of just screaming into the microphone of things that I guess people in her party, found funny. And I just let it happen. I couldn't even fight it anymore.
What? Wait, how does no one intervene?
No, nobody. And the funny thing was, the guy who was featuring for me, a guy named Ben, nice guy, funny guy. He taped it from the back when the woman got on stage, and he sent it to me the next day, and I put it on Instagram because I thought it was just a quick clip of this woman coming on stage, and I was just saying this is show business and whatever. And the owner of the club called me. He's like, "Hey man, could you not do that? It's not a good look for my club." I'm like, "Yeah, no shit. Like, it's not a good. I agree. It's not a good look for your club. So have somebody control. Like, he's never there. He's out doing other things or whatever. They don't have his parents, who no fault of theirs. They're older people. They kind of run the club. But what are they going to do? They're 75-year-old people. They're going to get up on stage and start bouncing the room. So it's just. I mean, I've had so many. I blame myself for half of them. Sometimes you go into gigs just in a bad mood, and you're almost to blame for the hellish of the niche of the gig. But then there's others where you're just like, how the fuck is this happening? And how am I not? I fancy myself the type of comic. I don't know if I saw you've talked to some good, big guys on here. Like, I think I can get out of like any situation. I've been doing it long enough to be able to kind of find a way out. But some nights I'm just like, I can't get out of this one. This is just going to be a nightmare from the beginning to the end.
Yeah. And when that happens, like, you kind of know from the bit, like, early, I feel like, in the set, like, you ever do this where you think you're going to have a line that's going to kill, and then that line fails. So then you go to, like, the line that you're like, well, this is my backup line. Then you do that, and then that line doesn't work. You're like, well, we're out of lines. We're out of life rats.
Yeah, we all know the ones that are going to be tried and true, no matter what city you're in, no matter what time the show is at. We all have those that we can go back to, and to right the ship. But when those don't work, you're fucked.
Yeah. Wow, that's insane. That I don't think anyone I've talked to had someone come up on stage. So she talked for like 15 minutes.
She was with a party of 8 people, and I don't know if you would agree with this, but it's always, and I would venture to say probably 90% of the time, the worst party is someone who you've given tickets to. It has burned me so many times. Turns out this was a friend of a friend who brought 9 people. And the friend called me and said, "Hey, can you get the tickets?" And I did, or whatever. And they turned out to be the absolute nightmares.
Yeah,
And it happened to me so many times.
that could not be more true. And I don't know if it's because they think it's like, since they know you, it's like a party, or they're like so excited. Like, I don't know what it is. My buddy and I used to run a show in this basement in Pittsburgh when we were both living in Pittsburgh, and my dad came, and I gave my dad a bunch of tickets to give out to try to fill it, and he gave them to his business partner, this lady, and she gave them to like 15 of her friends, and they were the rowdiest, drunkest group of people that I almost got into a fist fight with them, and we had to cancel the show. It never happened again after that.
Yeah, I think every comedian will tell you that the people you invite or who need one are always the worst ones. It's always a phone call at 5 minutes to 8. What time do you go on? We're still waiting for the check at the restaurant. I'm like, I don't have time for this. Like, just
Yeah.
either don't come, just don't come.
People don't get it, people that aren't in it don't get it, and it's not so much their fault, but you do have to, like, you'd hope they'd have a little bit more patience, or like kind of hear your side of it. Have you ever had, like, I know so many comics have these corporate gigs where it's obvious that the person that booked it has no idea how comedy is supposed to work. Like,
Yeah.
it's like at 3:00 in the afternoon. What do you think your worst, like, corporate show was?
I never did a hell of a lot of corporates, and I still really haven't. I've done a lot of different type of shows like that. And I mean, since I've become like headliner and things like that, I've been a little more of a stickler about where and when and how I'll go on, and almost to the point where I'll walk in, tell them how I need the sound to be and how I need this to be, and if it isn't that way, I probably wouldn't do it.
Yeah.
So I've had a few where I'm like, we either need to get this fixed, or just this is not. I'm not going on with that sound system or that light or whatever. So.
That must be freeing to be able to do that.
It's the greatest thing, because they'll eventually find a way to fix it. And in some cases, it's not their fault. They're not comedians. They don't know anything about sound. And I just did a place up. Actually, it was actually San Luis Obispo way, kind of. It was at a winery, and it was packed. I mean, they must have had 400 people there, which makes it even worse when you have a terrible sound system.
Right.
And they had like one, the same speaker you see at every open mic, that speaker on top of, some stanchion on the side of the stage. And it just sounds absolutely horrible. Every P is popping like crazy. And it's just the worst. And people were complaining throughout the show. And I mean, we made it through, but it reminded me to always just go, it's just not worth it for me to do this. I'll eat the $2,000, whatever it was, but I can't.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't have that, but that's good to know it comes one day, maybe.
Oh yeah. I mean, you almost kind of have to, because
Just
you're the one who
self-preservation.
looks like, yeah, you're the one who looks like shit in the end.
Yeah. It's you make a good point of, like, where they hurt more later. I mean, I think they always hurt more the more comfortable you feel. But,
Right.
like, for me, I think I've had at least one or two, and I know a couple other comics that have, kind of in those early years where you're, like, still pretty delusional about how good you are. Um,
Yeah.
but not too delusional that you can improve, where you have that bomb where you're like, I think this might be it. Like, I might be done.
Yeah.
From the early years, do you have anything where you're like, oh, it's time to rethink some things?
Yeah. I remember doing a show that up Sunset Boulevard. It's kind of gone now, that whole scene, but it used to be like a real 80s metal scene up there, like a Whiskey a Go-Go and places like that. And then it started to change like early '90s. It went from a little, but it was a very popular music scene up there, to where those places, every one of them was packed every night. And one guy was going to do this, I forget what he called it, comedy and music or whatever series. And the thinking was he was going to put comedians in between musical acts, which is a fucking nightmare always. It never worked. They're two different crowds. They're two different energies. It just does. I guess it worked in the 60s and the 70s. There would be a lot of times bands would have comics open for them, but it just doesn't work anymore for whatever reason. So it was Sam Tripoli, I don't know if you know Sam, myself, and Sean Pulaski, who's still out there doing it. And we were going between these like almost punk rock bands. One band, they were big in Los Angeles at the time. They were called Powder, and they were like this big like local punk rock band. And I in between, and I mean just bombing. Like Sean went up in between, bombed. Then Tripoli Sam went up. Then I was the last one in between whoever and Powder. And I mean, they were throwing, you name it. This is back in the days of smoking inside, cigarettes, lit, packed, beer can, brutal. So much so that I was doing my act. It was so bad. I was just bombing horribly. And the drummer for the band came walking out. People would just go berserk as soon as he walks out. And he came up behind me and was like, "Hey, dude, give this guy a break." I'm like, "Oh, just what I needed." You know? He's like, got his arm around me, like, "Let him tell his jokes." And I'm like, "Oh, please don't," you know. And then he like steps back a few feet. So, and I beginning, start again, and it's more. And then he just comes up and he goes, "All right, I'll take it from here." And he just took the microphone. I was just like, "It's not your night." Yeah. And I was like, "Thank you," and walked off. So that's every time I see Sam Tripoli a lot at a Comedy Store, and we talk about that one quite a bit. That was probably the worst.
Good.
But you know what? But once again, like I said, that was early on, and they're worse when it's 2 weeks ago. That makes it worse.
Yeah. You don't, you need that time away from it to let it heal a little bit. Like,
yeah,
for me, it hurts the most on like the drive back or like the subway back. It's like, because you're just immediately by yourself and you're like, I'm going to just sit in this,
Yeah.
And
I think, I mean, I would imagine it must happen in any type of performing. I don't think we're the only ones. I would imagine, guys who are on Broadway shows, doing 8 shows a week. I would imagine when it's over, they go backstage and talk to the other cast members. Go, I don't know, I wasn't feeling that crowd. I feel like everybody who is a live performer must have that. Not what we call it bombing. I don't know what they call it in those circles, but I feel like everybody has it. And I'd be interested to hear like what other like live performers, like Broadway guys or even musicians. I mean, they must walk out and go, that crowd is just, they suck.
Yeah, I'm sure they do. I think the difference is when they walk back and say that crowd didn't like me, there's a room full of people that can agree with them. When we walk back and we're like, I don't think that crowd liked me, it's like a waitress and she's like, do you want me to box this or not?
Exactly.
I don't know what you want me to say.
Yeah, it really is kind of a lonely world. You don't have the camaraderie of a cast,
Right. Because if everybody on the show bombs, that's one thing, and then you're kind of like, the crowd's horrible, they're all idiots, I hope they die. But if you're the only one that bombs and everybody else does well, nobody's going to have your back. Everybody's like high-fiving audience members on the way out, and you're trying to find a fire escape. You're like, I got to get out of here.
Yeah, it is. I don't know, whatever. It's an interesting way to make a living, I'll say that. But yeah, I was watching a Chris Rock documentary. I don't know what it was from, but anyway, maybe it was his Instagram stories. And it was his last tour, and he was touring large, giant venues, not stadiums, but theaters, bigger than theaters, arenas. And, he comes off stage, I don't know where he was playing, Forum out here in Los Angeles, 22,000 people. And he gets off stage and who's ever holding the camera. He's like, how was it? He goes, I don't know, man. Just wasn't feeling it. Like I just couldn't get them. And I'm like, Chris fucking Rock can't get the forum. Like, so
Yeah.
where it never changes. It never ends.
Yeah, it just keeps going. It's like from a bar show to a club to a theater, and then you're like, I don't know, I couldn't get him at the Staples Center tonight.
Right.
I just
I think
couldn't.
I think no matter who you are, from Chris Rock on down to whoever, uh, you always just start. Every show starts at zero again,
Yeah,
and
that's
you can either have a good one or it's just always back to zero.
yeah, that's a good point. What do you think is like your post-bomb coping mechanism? Like for me, it's like calling another comic, or like usually like horrible fast food or like takeout from the club. But like, what do you do so you don't like take the bridge?
Um, you know, I mean, once I could shake. I've gotten to where I could shake it off pretty good. That took a long time. I think that comes with just time, but that's one thing that I'm much better at. I'm better at the shake off. Now the shake off is pretty much done by the hotel room, and I don't really need. I'll go out and have a beer somewhere and whatever the case may be. But I'm pretty much over it by the end of the first Bud Light.
Yeah, you're like,
Yeah, I can shake them off pretty quick.
yeah. Do you have any ones that you still look back to that you're like, it's kind of or just around your shoulder, like, well, don't ever let it get that bad. Like shows that you kind of keep in the back of your head, like just remember how bad it can be.
Well, I mean, I think not necessarily. Sometimes the one that I always go back to about how bad it could be was uh, it's now closed. It was called Jokers with a Z, which is always a problem. Anytime they do the Jokers with a Z, you got a problem on your hands. And it was in Milwaukee. I don't know if you ever played it, but it was there for years. And honestly, probably had it been run properly, not a bad club. It had a good design, old down the stairs, low ceilings. Could have been cool, but it was the worst run shithole you'd ever been to. But beneath the strip club, now I'm not saying that in a bad way. It was actually like a high end strip club, like whatever the high end one would be. So that was part of the appeal of the whole thing. But you didn't know who was working there. Waitresses like quitting mid shift, that kind of place. Every day you'd walk in, different manager, different staff, different. Nobody was. You didn't know who to talk. You land in Milwaukee. Nobody can contact anybody. Where the hotel? All this shit. And then I don't know how to, like certain cities you go to, and not Milwaukee. Nothing against it. I love the city actually, but just the most trashy crowd I've ever played in front of. To where, everything you would think of when I say that: toothless, sleeveless, Trump flags, shit, just unbelievable. That crowd, and there's just no winning them over. Anytime somebody heckles their table, thinks it's the funniest shit in the world. You're the enemy. You know what I mean? So there's no winning, and that was one of my that was like to a point where I was like, how did I get here? Like, how did this become where it wound up? I was like to the point where I was thinking of like, I gotta find something else to do. This is not working.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's always the
So
best when you're like starting to think of your other skills. You're like,
yeah.
all right, I mean, I did that in college. I could probably pick that up again.
Yeah, like mid joke, like mid bomb, you're thinking of, oh man, I should have just stayed, in the union or whatever.
Yeah, right. It's like, oh my God, am I gonna have to become an electrician? You can't.
Yeah, that's what I was, you motherfucker.
Were you really?
Yeah, still am. Still a proud card carrying IBW member, Local 3, New York City.
Well, just in case, just
Yeah,
shake out, or
just in case. I fall back on it quite a bit, actually. Yeah, so I mean, I had skills, Colin.
no, I believe it, man. I'm sure you could rewire the whole place.
You better believe it.
I'll ask you this, a cliche question. I know it is, but all the bombs, so many years in the business, you kind of become numb. Is that what you know? Is that where you learn to shake it off easier, or is there something else you're telling yourself after all these years about when you have a bad show or a bad set? What do you think you've learned the most about how to deal with them?
I think what keeps you coming back, uh, at least in my case, is the good ones. No matter how many shit ones, there's a packed Saturday night out there somewhere that's just going to be from the first word you say to the last word you say on stage. It's just the roof is coming off the place.
Yeah.
And if you get those and you're like, oh, this will carry me for another year and a half. This will carry me through the Milwaukees, through the Naples, through the Whiskey a Go-Go's for a while. And I think those are the ones that keep you going. And they're out there. They're probably more so than the bombs when you get to a certain level. You get just the crushers where you're like, oh fuck, everything's scoring right now. And that's when it's. But then it all ends the same way. It all ends in the Hilton Garden Inn. That's so. And then you start, like I said, and you start again the next day from zero.
Yeah.
And see where it winds up.
It all ends with you eating a kind of soggy turkey club by yourself.
Because it's kind of what you were saying. Even in the good ones, in the great sets you have, there's still no one to talk to about it. It's over and you could chat with the waitress, or you could chat with the feature act or the opening act about it. But those guys don't want to hear about you gloating about your great set, so they're done with it. And you can talk to your significant others, but they've heard enough. And so you're really just kind of like, all right, well, that was good. And that's the end of that.
You can ride it I feel like for about 20 to 30 minutes.
Yeah.
It's like you have about 30 minutes of feeling really excited, and then that ends and you're like, all right, now what are we gonna do?
Yeah. I think usually it ends when if you do like a little meet and greet after the show and you're standing out in the bar or whatever, and the people are filing out, and you'll get a few. I come here all the time. I come to this club all the time. That was the best show I've ever seen. And then you're like, oh, this is great. This is great. And then you'll get the one guy who goes, nice skit. And then you're like, this obviously I'm not. It means nothing to that guy.
Yeah.
He will forget about this performance by the first red light out of this club.
Right.
It'll all be washed away from him. So it doesn't make.
I don't know if this is something other comics have felt. Before we wrap up here, I'll ask you this. I used to have a real hard time talking to people after shows of even when they were complimentary, because it was almost like, I don't think you even get it. I don't know, they'll be like, funny stuff. And I'm like, funny stuff? I was like, I put 6 months into that.
I know.
7 minutes. I know.
It almost makes me, I often want to ask them, people like that, because, especially in this day and age we live in where everyone is so checked out with phones and everything. You almost think they're not even listening. They just can't wait to, get to that car and turn their phone on and see what they've been missing. So I almost want to ask these people after it's over, what was your favorite thing I said? And I would bet 95% of them couldn't tell you. They're like, right. Oh, I don't remember. I just heard it. It didn't sink in.
Yeah, they're like, I really like the part where you thanked everybody for coming out. I thought that was really good.
or when they tell you, I love that thing you did, and it was the feature acts joke. You're like, that was the other guy. It was not.
Yeah, right. Or I don't know if you ever had this where they say, I really like that joke you did, and it's a joke they have seen you do somewhere else, and you didn't even do it.
Right. Well, at least it was yours.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, it's what a way to make a living.
Yeah. Chris, thanks for doing this, man. What's your socials and your pod? Plug your socials and your pod on.
The podcast is called Cover to Cover. It's doing real well, thank God. These are fun. These podcasts are the way to go these days, man. It's if they catch on, there's no stopping them. So it's great. And then my socials were all Chris Franjola, Franjola, and that's all that shit.
Right on, man. Well, thanks for doing this. I appreciate it.
You bet.
And
Yeah, happy to do it.